Good morning. Hello, everyone. We're so happy to have you here. I'm Cora Stryker. I'm one of the three co-founders of Bright Saver. And if you're here, you probably already know we're a nonprofit, and our mission is to make solar accessible to everyone, in particular, low to moderate income Americans, renters and homeowners alike. And we know this is possible because we're seeing it happen all over the world. So, Kenya, Pakistan, Germany, we're going to talk about quite a bit today. We're seeing this movement, this people-led movement of folks taking power into their own hands, literally, and adopting these small-scale solar systems, which we believe is the key to making solar an option for anyone. And just a note on names, that this technology goes by a couple different names. We generally call it plug-in solar. You may hear it called portable solar in Germany. It's called balcony solar. There are variations, but it's essentially the same thing. We're talking about small, under 1200-watt solar systems that plug directly into a standard outlet. So we believe this is the key to getting solar into the hands of everyone who wants it, particularly here in this country. I find this very inspiring because we're in a situation, particularly here in this country, where government's not doing what it's supposed to do. It's not protecting us from what's happening on the climate front. So I find it very exciting that we are trying to jumpstart something that eventually will take off on its own, hopefully sooner than later. So given there's this global movement of small scale plug-in solar adoption, we're lagging behind in the US, and we're not okay with that. So the question is, what do we do about it? And we're here this morning to talk to two visionaries on either side of the pond who have already done something pretty substantial to advocate for plug-in solar in Germany and also in Utah. So first, my co-founder Rupert Mayer is going to be talking to Christian Ofenheusle. Uh, Ofenheusle, who has been leading the movement, particularly in Germany and now also worldwide, to drive plug-in solar adoption. And I think it's safe to say without his work and the work of his colleagues, we wouldn't have such widespread adoption in Germany in the millions. So we're going to hear from him about some of the challenges he encountered and how they overcame them. And after that, we're going to hear from our third co-founder, Kevin Chou, who will be talking to Representative Raymond Ward, another visionary who somehow, I still want to know how he worked this miracle, Raymond. He built a bipartisan coalition in Utah to pass legislation just a few months ago, and it was unanimously voted upon. And it's really moved incredibly fast right now. If you live in Utah, you can order one of these, and once it arrives, you can plug it into a standard outlet and have 1200 watts of solar energy that day. So this is moving faster than I think even we anticipated. And we are super excited to be building on the work of Raymond and Christian and others. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my co-founder, Rupert Mayer. He's our technical co-founder. He started several software companies, one of which was ranked as one of the fastest growing companies in the United States. And now we are lucky enough that he's turned his attention to climate. And it's hard for me not to say more great things about you, Rupert, but I'm going to make myself stop there. And I'm going to turn it over to Rupert Mayer.
Okay, thank you very much, Cora. And I have the pleasure to welcome Christian. Since I'm a native German speaker, I can give another shot at pronouncing his last name correctly, Ofenheusle. So thank you, Christian, for being here with us. You've been at the forefront of the plug-in and balcony solar movement in Europe for many years now, and a relentless advocate for citizens' rights to produce their own power. You're the chairman and founding member of the German Plug-in Solar Association, and you've also made this passion your career by founding Empower Source, a consultancy based around all things small-scale renewable energy. So we want to hear more about all this from you. And I think let's just start at the very beginning. When and how did you become involved in plug-in solar?
Yeah, thank you very much, Rupert. First, about the name, both are accepted. It's all good.
You're very
Okay,
forgiving.
so
Thank you.
yeah, of course. I appreciate the effort. I started getting well. The topic is quite old actually. Plug-in solar devices have been around, or the microinverters that are needed for that, and people who are willing to combine them with a plug and a solar panel have been around since the 1990s actually. So Northern European invention, the microinverter, and has also been brought to the US, I think, pretty early on. But the prices were just not compatible back in the day. So it took quite a while and quite some development and price drops in order to make it economically feasible to use them. And this happened pretty much, I think, mid 2010s.
10 years
And
ago.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, actually quite a long time ago. Yeah. But the adaptation was quite slow, and the reason for that is mainly because the regulation wasn't up to par. Um, there was quite a bias against decentralized energy production apart from rooftop solar. So this was demonized basically by the DSOs, by the utilities, and also by some media outlets who were following the wording of the utilities. And this is why it didn't take off so quickly. Then in about 20, let's say 14 to 16, the German Solar Association, Deutsche Gesellschaft für Sonnenenergie, had an action group concerning plug-in solar and started to bring this topic into into the standardizing process. So what is UL from your perspective is VDE from our perspective. And they went in there and started to change the standards so that they would allow for feeding in electricity backwards into your final circuit, into your household. And this was in 2017 when it was foreseeable that this kind of new regulation would be adapted and would be published. This is when uh, this is when it caught my eye,
Mhm.
and pretty soon it was clear that this for me was the way uh, to go and to found my first company.
Mhm.
Because I saw the potential of this being exactly what Cora stated in the beginning, the tool to bring solar to everyone, right?
Mhm.
And this absolutely, I found this idea fantastic, and I've followed it ever since.
Excellent, excellent. So the landscape that you describe in Germany about 10 years ago sounds very much like the landscape that we encounter in the US today. So there's awareness of this technology. There's no rocket science. It's basically standard parts, microinverters, solar panels, a cord to plug it in. But there's a lot of uncertainty and doubt and gray area around the regulation, around the standards. So what was it in Germany that propelled this from a few people just plugging it in their backyard who are not concerned about the rules to actually becoming a mass market movement? And I think today we are in the millions. Actually, just this morning, I saw that IKEA just announced a Balconies solar power plant on their website in Germany today, which I think is really cool. So what was the first breakthrough that brought this into the public spotlight?
Yeah, actually, it was a gradual development. We've seen exponential growth since about 2018 when I started. The
Mhm.
first number that we had was an estimate by the German Solar Association of about 40,000 devices in the market, unregistered.
2018, in 2018 already,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
40,000. Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
It had to do with there was a sort of energy company that went bankrupt later, but they tried as one of their promotional activities to gift their customers with plug-in solar devices. It's yeah, but after that there was a long time of nothing, and then pretty much when we started, we were lucky enough to cooperate with the first utility in Germany that introduced a simplified registration form for plug-in solar. So usual registration forms were the same ones that you have to use for rooftop solar, so quite a stash, and an electrician has to sign everything and stuff like that. And the new standard actually proposed an exception for that, for plug-in solar, in 2018, May 2018. And so in July 2018, the first utility had its the first simplified form ready. And we immediately latched onto that and said, okay, let's do a campaign out of this. And that was in Bonn, so the former German capital. Now it's Berlin, as you know. But Bonn, it was before. And we started a flyer campaign and a media campaign promoting this new option to simply plug it in, register with a simple sheet of paper, and then you're done. And so that was the first sort of direct approach that we had back in the day. Then in 2019, we had a first appearance on the trade fair, on the Intersolar trade fair, so the largest solar or renewable energy trade fair in Europe, in Munich. Very tiny booth, like 9 square meters, really, really tiny. But it was a start, and we built from that. And each year, we doubled the size, basically.
So in this case, that was not the Bundesverband, the association yet. That was your consulting company.
Precisely. We started off, you introduced as a consulting agency, but we actually started off as a marketing and communications agency, because the main ingredient that was missing for the success was publicity, right? Communication. People didn't understand, people didn't know, and we changed that. We had a lot of media attention. I've been on, let's say, 100 trade fairs, small, tiny trade fairs all over Germany, also Austria, and presented the technologies for people to touch it, to get a feeling of what it is really, to see it working. I always made sure that I really placed the panel in the sun, that we had a booth outside and could directly feed into the fair grid, right? So that I could always say, look, they're frying sausages over there, and they're using the energy I'm producing here at my booth, So to make it more relatable, right?
Tangible,
and
yes.
we managed to do that. And then I think the big boost, of course, was energy crisis coming with the Ukraine war, where suddenly the cheap oil and gas from Russia was no longer available, that Germany had built on for years before. And people were very afraid of energy scarcity. And this was a big boost. But this lasted about from February to October, let's say 2022. And then all of a sudden there was a chip crisis, and there was no more products available. So shops had to close down temporarily, open up for a week, then close down for 2 weeks, because everything was sold out again. So that was a very hard time, let's say, for a marketing agency like ours, as you can imagine. But this was also around the time when we sort of switched towards consultancy and towards lobbying, basically.
Got it.
So, and this was already, we had each year the number doubled. So 40, 80, 160, right? And so on. And I don't mean registered devices, because registrations is still very low. This is hereditary, because we started off with these complicated registration forms, as I told you. And so the thought of the people is, okay, we're not going to register. We don't have to. It's just it works without registration, you know.
Plug it
We
in,
can just
right?
plug it
Why
in and it
even bother?
works, right? So yeah, so people refrain from that. This has become better also because we promote registration because it's important. Now that we have 1 million registered, about 4 million in the grid, this is a relevant size, right? This is
That's
grid
several large
relevant.
power plants, right? That is making a real impact. And that also
Very
explains this discrepancy between the numbers. You see one article talking about hundreds of thousands and hitting the 1 million threshold. And then in other news pieces, you see the 4 million number quoted. So we're now officially at 1 million registered and estimated 4 million installed.
yeah.
That is absolutely remarkable. And just back to this, what sounds to me like the seminal moment in 2018 or 19, and with this first utility company. Can you clarify, was there a law passed at that point forcing the utility company to accept backfeeding? Because that's what the big discussion seems to be about. The utility companies basically being the gatekeepers because laws here, certainly state laws in the US and also laws in most countries, require this interconnection agreement with the utilities if you want to backfeed any power. And to your point, that is a big and complicated agreement which needs electrician drawings and permits and all sorts of things that make it way too complicated for these small systems. That's also what makes rooftop solar so much more expensive than it should be, all this soft costs, all this overhead. But so if I understand correctly, 2018-19, no one forced that one utility to say, hey, we're good with this. It was, did you lobby them into it? Did they think it's good PR for them? Did they just have the greater good in mind, or what made them become the trailblazer for this movement? Because it sounds like we have to find this utility in the US, this power company, the good power company.
Yeah, I want to mix this up a little with the next utility that accepted, because the next one, the second one, was not one utility, but was a whole conglomerate of utilities from Bavaria. So Bavaria has a regional subsegment of the uh, BDEV, which is the Utility and Energy Provider Association in Germany. And they have a subsegment in Bavaria, and the deciders of the utilities there are always in touch. They meet regularly and meet to specific topics and really try to, walk in the same direction. And they were the second ones, and the big advantage there is that it was several utilities at once that accepted the same registration form. And one of them, or there were also not only city utilities, but also like on countryside utilities, like large areas that were covered by that. So this was the really big step. I mean, Bonn was the first, and actually, as the example from Bavaria shows, it's about individuals who bring the topic up and manage to bring people together in order to find uh, a common benefit that they can draw from that. So no, there were no laws in place or anything to force them to do it. They just saw that, okay, we are going to have renewable energy anyway, and we're going to have it decentralized anyway, which is the standard since 2000, since the year 2000 in Germany with the energy law EEG back in the day. And yeah, well, rooftop solar that took off back then, and the scheme that they had. And the utility just in Bonn, this one person who was responsible for the whole process just said, well, we're going to have it anyway. And now this new regulation is there. Why would you still demand from people that whole package, that whole slab of documents, and just
Complicated document. Yeah.
leave out that one signature by the electrician, and everything else they have to fill out. That doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah,
If
yeah,
we
the
if
size
we
of the
want to do
roof, the
this,
type of the roof, the type of conduit,
really
all the technical
useless,
terminology. I've tried
completely
it.
useless.
Yeah, I've tried to
Yeah,
submit an interconnection agreement here
yeah,
in the US, and it was absolutely daunting. So it
yeah.
was really that's super interesting. It was really one utility company, or even just one person at a utility company that was
Basically,
farsighted
yeah.
enough to say, let's do it. This is good for society. This is good for us. We will have it anyway. I love this. But then probably there
Also, let me just add one thing. People were using it anyway, just
already.
not registered. So there was a sort of pressure, especially after a while when they saw, okay, the numbers are rising rapidly, and we don't know where they are. We don't know what's happening in our grid. The
Mhm,
German grid is very backwards anyway, and this puts another strain on it. We don't know anything about it. So after a while, when this became more and more popular, the utilities didn't have a choice. They had to react in some kind of way. And they first did it by introducing the simplified registration form, and then later themselves petitioned for dumping the registration with them altogether. Because if you receive hundreds of registrations every day, they all go on the same desk. You can never work this off. It's
mhm.
impossible, right? So they dump the registration. Now there's one central registration that you have to do, and from there it gets distributed automatically to the utility, and that's it, right? So it was in their own interest.
Got it. So if you think about the key factors that enabled and empowered and accelerated the movement, it was really people just doing it, even in the gray area. Then people like you who advocated for it, who relentlessly promoted it, who went to the trade fairs, really built this ground up, groundswell, bottoms up, grassroots movement, creating excitement, and then someone at a utility saying, yeah, let's do this. And basically the ball just kept rolling. And so you've had this exponential growth. Oh, there's so much more to explore here, but unfortunately we're already coming to the end of our 20 minutes. So maybe let's just wrap it up. Where do you see Germany now? 4 million? Is there an end or a plateau in sight? Or do you think exponential growth will continue for years? And the second, what would be your key recommendation for us in the US to um, get the ball rolling in the same way?
Well, yeah. I That's funny you asking, because with my consultancy, I'm also consulting companies that are working in the market, placed in the market, and I'm consulting them on product development, consulting them and market approach. And what I've been preaching for 2 years now, I think, is that the peak is already behind us.
Mhm,
The peak for classical balcony solar. So meaning two modules, one module, inverter, power line, plug, done, right? This is over. This is not interesting anymore. I've been promoting this for 2 years now, and the development proved it. 60% of all new devices now are delivered with a battery attached.
mhm,
So this is an additional technology that we see uh, rolled out a lot, and it will be the predominant kind of product that will be in the household concerning energy production. We also have always seen a push towards more power, right? People really want the largest possible production plant they can have
mhm,
in their place. And so what we will see in the future is technology that will enable people to use more appliances, to use more larger production capacity, larger storage capacity. And if we get our will, it will also be used in a grid supported way. right? Not only for getting more out of it for yourself, producing more energy for yourself, more self-reliant. This is a part of it and a very important motivator, but also to provide, to offer parts of your production and storage capacity for grid stabilizing, resilience building functions, right? So this is what we're working on right now. And hopefully this will be the future of the grid, a resilient, decentralized, green energy grid in Germany. Yeah. So that's the one thing. And could you just repeat the other question again?
Yes, the question was if there's one thing you would
Oh,
recommend
yeah.
for us in the US that we can do to get in a similar trajectory.
Yeah. Copy Raymond Ward as often as you can, and bring a lot of copies of him into the different electorates, because the thing is, you took with Ray's effort and success, you took like 3 steps at once. It took us it took myself from 2018 to 2024 to get the first law. It's a federal law, right? But to get the first law out and published, enabling plug-in solar, and you have that right now, and you can build on that. And I think that's the deciding factor. Heap on that like nothing else. And that's number one. And also what you mentioned before, I want to absolutely stress this. It always needs both. It needs the push and the pull. So get a community started, get it grassroots, the grassroots moving out, get pressure on electorates, get people talking and writing to their congressmen or whatever. On the one hand, on the other hand, have a good solution ready. Write your own, laws. Write the adaptions you want to have in the standards. Write them down, discuss it with the right people, offer a good solution. It's always the combination, push and pull.
Yeah, fantastic. Great. Well, thank you so much, Christian. This is a great segue to our second part today. And yeah, with that, I have the pleasure to introduce Kevin Chou. It wouldn't do him justice to call him our third co-founder because he was number one. He is the one who initiated this project of Brightsaber. He has had remarkable success as an entrepreneur. He then became a philanthropist. The most sustainable academic building in the US, which is Chou Hall at UC Berkeley. There's his name. And that was also how he got interested in climate and sustainability. And decided to focus on that as his next challenge. And we met in fall, and he convinced me and then Cora to join this sustainability venture here. And over to you, Kevin.
Oh, thank you, Rupert. Fantastic. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Raymond Ward. But before we get there, I just want a quick note. I see some Q&A being dropped in. I encourage everyone to do that after the session. Cora will help us work through some of those Q&A questions, but we definitely want to take questions from the audience, and feel free to start putting that into the Q&A tool. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Raymond Ward. Now, he isn't your typical lawmaker. He's been a practicing family physician. He has both an MD and a PhD from the University of Washington. And in the state legislature, which has served since 2015, he's led efforts on key healthcare and budget reform items, including Medicaid reforms, medical cannabis updates, strengthening child support laws. And if that wasn't enough, he then went and became the first American politician and championed plug-in solar, which is the most innovative technology, I think, in the last few years, that he somehow championed and got through the Utah legislature. So thank you for joining us. Is there anything else in your Renaissance man background that I missed?
That was very generous. Thank you.
Well, great. Well, I mean, given all that background for the last 10 years, what brought you, what gave you the inspiration to work on this legislation for plug-in solar?
Renewable energy is an issue that I've cared about for some time. In the legislature, I'm not regarded as an expert on that in the Utah legislature. I sit on the health committees, which is where I'm at home, but not on the natural resources committees. But it is an issue that I've thought about, and really, it was just an article that I read in the New York Times about how things were going well in Germany. It's due to Christian's work over there, and it's just a super simple thing. Every 7-year-old knows how to say, "Hey, so and so has one of these. How come I can't have one of those?" To ask their parents. And it really is just that question, right? The fact that it existed and was doing well in Germany made it much easier to start asking the question here and say, well, how come it's obvious this works. How come we can't have it here? What's getting in our way? And then it took a while to figure out. The barriers are not obvious. It took 4 or 5 months to even figure out what they were. But in the end, after kind of sorting through what the barriers were, it turned out that one of the barriers, not the largest one, but one of the barriers was a state law that we happened to have on the books that said, if you have anything that generates your own power, you have to have a contract signed with your utility, which makes sense if you're putting a huge bank and of course, if you're going to sell something to the utility, you're going to have a contract with them. But it didn't make sense in this context. So that gave me the chance then to open a bill file that on the one hand dealt with that one tiny obstacle to take out that requirement, to say if they're below a limit, we shouldn't require that, but that also then allowed it to raise the conversation.
Mm. So as you worked through that, so it looked like you amended an existing bill. What sort of obstacles or objections came from either regulators or utility companies or labor unions? And then what ultimately garnered their support to enable this legislation to pass?
So it turns out in the real world, legislation can pass because there's overwhelming support, but also legislation can pass if no one's paying attention and there's no opposition. So I went and made the case to my colleagues, but this was not an issue that they had heard from their constituents about or that they understood. It was not something where they started with preconceived notions about it. It was just a new thing that I was telling to them. So the central core here was our utility, our largest utility, not the only one, but by far the largest one in Utah is Rocky Mountain Power. And had they opposed it, they would have been able to shoot it down. But I worked with them ahead of the session. Was fortunate to talk to a couple of their mid-level engineers, not only their government representative person. When I first talked to him, said, "Oh no, we for sure oppose that." But I could also tell from the conversation that he didn't quite know what an inverter was, and so we didn't have the technical knowledge to understand it. But when I was able to talk with a couple of their engineers, they had a couple of changes that they wanted in the bill, but which I was happy to put in to say, look, there needs to be a size limit on it. These are not large panels; they're small panels, and it needs to be clear that these meet a safety standard. And in the United States, we largely do that for electrical products from Underwriter Laboratories. So they said, well, you need to have something in there. The product needs to be certified by them in order for this to be active, which I was happy to put in. But then with those changes, and it needed to be clear that they didn't have any liability, which is certainly fair, right? There's nothing, it needs to be that they don't have liability if this is something you're doing on your own. But once those changes were in the bill, they didn't even show up at the hearings. They just didn't care anymore. They were satisfied that it wouldn't harm them. And so then, I had a few individuals come and support it at the hearings, but no one opposed it. And that was enough to get it through.
Is there something, for those of us that don't live in the state of Utah, is there something special about Utah or the way that, the politics work in Utah that you think?
I don't know. I do think there's a community in Utah, as there is anywhere, who is hoping that we get more renewable energy and who is hoping that in the large scale that helps us with our climate problem. There's also a deep-rooted idea in Utah that the government should not interfere in everything. And if I am doing something that benefits me and doesn't hurt anybody else, that never mind all the other things, I should be allowed to do that thing. And I think this kind of energy production appeals to me for that reason and appeals to my colleagues for that reason. And I think in general appeals to most people for that reason.
And one of the common issues that we hear about from, certainly utilities or some of the people that are on the front lines of the utilities communication efforts, but also just everyday people, is a concern about safety. And I'm curious, how did you deal with with any new technology, especially with something as complicated as the grid, interactions? There's bound to be questions about that. How did you deal with any of the safety questions that came up?
Well, I think the first answer is to defer to our usual way of dealing with it, which is we have a safety certifier that's under Ryder Laboratories for electrical products, and say, I have a background that I am not by my own self the person to tell you this and this is the right standard. But whatever that normal process is that we go through, I'm happy to go through that process. Germany has showed that you can do this and it is safe. So don't sit there and tell me, well, this probably will be very dangerous and burn everything down, because it hasn't. But to be able to point to a place where it's already working was a hugely powerful argument. When you get to the more technical people, it's not a complicated thing. It's a simple thing. We should be able to do this thing. And so I think many of the rules right now that make it difficult were put in place without even thinking of this use case. And it will take effort to go back. I mean, there's still things in our National Electrical Code that will make other larger things difficult, that it will take some other effort to get them weeded back out. It will take effort over time, but that needs to be done as well. But this first step of just these small panels, they don't have any of those barriers. So I think we'll get them here very soon.
Yeah. As you think about this bill, and now that it's signed into law by the governor, did you have to? It sounds like there was no opposition. I was going to ask if there was any compromises you had to make along the way. I just want to ask it anyway, in case there was anything.
The only changes that were needed to be made to the bill were the ones that the utility said, if this is in there, we won't oppose it. And I was like, well, I'm super happy to put in there because you would be able to shoot it down if you opposed it. And that was really it.
What were those points?
Just so there was a size limit, which in the bill is 1.2 kilowatts, and it was clarified that the utility did not have a liability if you did this thing, and it was clarified that this only counted if the product being sold also was certified through our normal process, which called out under Ryder Laboratories, and in the bill it also called out the National Electrical Code, said it can't be opposed to those. It so turns out that these small panels are not prohibited by any of the National Electrical Codes. So that one turned out, I didn't even know it at the time of the bill, that particular thing is met.
Great. And for the audience, we've been diving into a lot of the technical and safety requirements, and as Mr. Ward has alluded to, under Ryder Laboratories and the work there. And so we'll have a future one of these webinars where we'll bring together and talk about some of the technical aspects and bring some experts and partners to talk about that. So great. So we got this legislation passed. Who do you think stands to benefit the most when you think about your constituents and the people in the state of Utah? Who do you think benefits the most from a bill like this?
Any person who wants one of these just because they want one. They find it would please them to produce a little bit of their own power. They find it would please them to reduce their own energy bill. They just like the idea. They know their wife would like it for a Christmas present. They would rather not get a $45,000 second mortgage on their home to put on their roof. They just would like to have one. And from that beginning, other people will see it. Honestly, Utah is not the best market for these, right? The best market is places that have very expensive power. People have a much more stark interest in their own pocketbook in states where power is much more expensive, and for a lot of good reasons in planning. Right now, Utah power is cheaper than many other states, but there's still plenty of people here who would like to have one. And as soon as the under Ryder Laboratory certification's out, I'm going to have one.
Fantastic. One of the things that we've been very lucky to have a few other state legislators also attend this session. I see in the audience. What kind of message would you have to other legislators in other states that are thinking about introducing a similar bill in their states?
Well, I think, legislative staff in all the states will help go through your code, because, the code that we happen to have here in Utah didn't get put in place thinking of these panels, right? it got put in place thinking of large installations across an entire roof, and that was just whatever language happened to be there at the time. So, you know, in each individual legislature, you'll need to go through and see what the code says and see if right now your statute does prohibit it. There's probably places where it doesn't prohibit it. I know in some states, it's not a state law that prohibits it, it's a utility rule, but state law can overrule utility rules as well. So if there's utility rules that prohibit it, then there probably will need to be some work to say, hey, under these parameters, dear utility, you're still taken care of. You can't prohibit it in these settings. So each one will be a little different.
Right. So to summarize, I think if the state has something on the books that prohibits that, that's certainly the first place to work at from a legislative standpoint. And if there isn't, then look into the public utility commissions and see what the rulemaking is at the commission level. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Great. How can we certainly have a number of other nonprofits and clean energy advocates here as well. What do you think? Do you have any advice for us who are working to bring this type of clean energy all across the country? What can advocates and organizations that are trying to make more of this possible across the United States, what can we do to work with legislators like you?
All I can do is echo what Christian said, right? It takes a push and a pull. When people ask for it, politicians know how to respond. When people ask for a thing, but we got to start asking for it. And to me, the certificate, like in Germany, the VDE certification was the thing that allowed it to really start becoming more legal. And although there were some people who had done it without that certification, it would not have grown largely without that certification. So when we get that first certification from Underwriter Laboratories, I think that's the starting gun. But there's dozens of other places that it needs to be brought to. So some of those will be in a political setting. Some of those will be in a technical setting. They will be in the other committees of Underwriter Laboratories for larger products or different kinds of products. There are many other little barriers about the batteries that we have right now. And it will take people who have knowledge or can get knowledge about how those bureaucracies normally operate to go put pressure on them. Most of those, just a true statement, I mean, Underwriter Laboratories is a for-profit company, and the NEC codes are a nonprofit. But the truth is that both of those organizations operate usually and typically off the demands of businesses who use their services, who come to them in a certain setting to ask for change for that business's commercial interest, is the way it normally goes there. So they have been a little bit puzzled even to talk to us at first, although I think they kind of understand where we're coming from now, just because it wasn't really that setting. And that's okay. They've been willing to listen to us as well. But the other big thing that will happen if we get that certificate, when we get the Underwriter Laboratory certification for the small panels, is then we will have businesses who are selling this thing who also would like to sell these other products. And then those businesses also will become our allies to go back and help lobby for the changes that are needed for larger products and for products that are worth more because they're coupled with batteries.
Yeah. And a big shout out to Gizmo Power, who's been doing this work for almost 2 years,
on their own, out there going to every possible location, every possible little obstacle, and trying to lobby for it. Yes.
Absolutely. Well, great. So the last question, and we'll open it up to questions from the audience. When you look forward, what is your vision for where this all goes, in a few years?
Well, I just want to be, have as many as Germany. That's all. I would love to see a broad-spec product that people easily knew what it was. You do not wonder what a toaster is. You just know that if you want one, you can get one, and your neighbor probably has one. And I would like to get to the point where we think of this thing kind of like our other consumer products that we have that we can purchase if we want. So that would be one. And the other one really is, there also is significant other benefit if we could get regulations that easily allowed for medium-sized installations, right? So Gizmo Power in particular is selling a carport that's covered with solar panels. It's not going to be covered under this first certification because it's larger. But if we could get the rules in place, that size of installation of solar panels could easily be sold. It could easily be safe. It could easily just have a power cord to it that you could make the cord safe, and then you could wheel one in and plug it in. It's just a dryer outlet. It's not a crazy new kind of outlet. And the easier we make that, the more of them there will be, the better off we're going to be.
Yeah. Well, Representative Ward, huge thank you for everything that you're doing and for joining us today and showing that clean energy can be smart, it can be simple, it can be bipartisan. So thank you so much for everything that you've done.
You're so welcome. So glad to be here.
All right. Well, Cora, we'll turn it back over to you for questions from the audience.
Sure. Well, thank you all so much. That was an amazing conversation, and we're getting some great questions from the audience. And I'll just say right now, we're not going to have time to answer all of them in the detail they deserve. So we will be sending out a follow-up email to this webinar, and we will make sure to dive into some of these pretty technical questions. But just big picture, there was one question that I for sure I'll answer. Are we pursuing legislation in other states? Yes, absolutely. So we are already talking to state legislators. We are working with on the ground grassroots organizations because we want to replicate what Raymond Ward did in Utah. We know that if we can get such legislation passed in a handful of states, that'll bring manufacturers to our country. They will compete, prices will get driven down, and this thing will take off. But I want to look at some specific questions. There are a number of questions about what is the outlook in terms of how many more megawatts can we get on the grid, or gigawatts. And so I don't know who would like to take that, but I'd love to have sort of a vision of where we think we can go in 5 years when we're successful and we get legislation in more states.
What do you just take? Let's just take Germany. What do we say? Would they think that they have 4 million installed, 1 million registered and 4 million installed?
Right.
So if each of those if each of those was 1 kilowatt, then that would be 4 gigawatts of power. I mean, I'm not sure they're all that size, but if there was 4 million installed and they were each a kilowatt, that would be 4 gigawatts. That is 2 or 3 large power plants.
Right. So these are small as individuals, but altogether they add up to quite a lot. So,
Yes.
that's why this has to be a big thing. And I also have a few questions about, someone in New York says, can I just buy one from in Utah and then bring it to New York City? Would someone like to talk about some of the subtleties here, state to state?
I think the subtleties here is you probably could do that, and no one would probably stop you. In the end, this is something that I don't expect that if it's small, utilities will have an interest to go after. I don't know why they would. So similar to what happened in Germany, I think people will start purchasing them and installing them here, even if there's some obscure rule in their utilities code that says you can't. And that's okay if people start doing that. In the end, we want all those rules also to permit it. We do want it to work with utilities. We don't want to be fighting utilities. We want to get to the point where they also agree that this is okay. But I don't think you will be able to stop people who start buying them.
And I think that's a great point that Christian brought out, that a lot of this bottoms-up grassroots movement in Germany happened in the absence of any clear rules. It happened in the absence of standards. It happened in the gray area simply because people could buy it and they did it. And I think to the question, will anyone get in trouble? There are several layers to Ray's point. Even if there is a law that says you need an interconnection agreement if you backfeed any power to the grid. The first is if your solar panel is relatively small, if it's just one smaller solar panel that you hang on your balcony, then you will be feeding back only tiny amounts to the grid because almost everything will be consumed within the home. But then if your system is a little bit bigger and or you're away for a few weeks, then a little bit of power will flow back to the grid. Then the next question is, will anyone know this? Do they have smart meters that even detect power flowing back? And is this data reported back to the utility? And then the next level is, will anyone look at it? Will anyone mine this data and look for maybe a brief period where someone fed back a few watts? And then the question is, will anyone care? And will they want to give that person a call, send them a letter, ask them what they're doing, let alone get them in trouble anyway? So I think there are enough layers that enough brave people will just want to try it. And as long as they can be sure that it's safe, they will, and I think they should actually try it.
And just to point out, we have right now, people can buy a generator that they can hook up to their house, and that already you could buy a diesel generator. If you know what you're doing, you can hook it up to your house to use as backup when the power goes down. That thing also feeds back a significant amount of power into the grid, and hasn't, we haven't made national rules or laws to stop people from doing that. So over time, the utilities and all of us will think about what set of rules make sense. But having some products to buy will help shape that conversation.
We have a question about batteries. Can one of you speak to how batteries might change this situation with regulation and also power generation and usage?
Battery makes the power more valuable, right? I mean, one of solar power's weaknesses is that it tends to make power during a time of day when we've got plenty of power, and then not as much power when you need it during a later time of day when there's power demands on the grid that are much larger. And even for your own self, if a battery lets you, if in the morning you're making more power than you need in your house, if you put that back out on the grid, you won't get your money's worth. But if you have a battery that you can just store it till that evening, afternoon or evening, and use it then it all will benefit you. Plus, it allows you to have a better chance to use it if why you want it is for when the power goes out. If that's one of the main reasons that you want it, is that you have a backup to give yourself a little power when the power is down, a battery is a much more reliable way to know that that will be available to you.
I'm curious, from Christian's standpoint, was there anything that needed to change from the regulatory or any other part of Germany to, as batteries became more and more popular as part of the balcony systems?
Yeah, well, we're not there yet, unfortunately, on a regulatory side of things, right? So back in last year, when the solar package 1 was the big solar bill that was published by the government, when in there it had a provision that the registration process was to be simplified again. Now this time in the online register, and the only registration left. And they already included, without there being a provision in the law or in any standard, already included an option to register a battery. Now the problem, in addition to your plug-in solar device, right? So the issue is, if you do that, because there's no standard or legislation in place, the utility can come to you again, approach you and say, okay, but the battery itself needs to be registered during the standard form and by an electrician, and needs to also be connected by an electrician. You cannot plug that in because there is no standard and there's no law in place. So it's, again, some sort of gray area. And again, we're having the same process. Millions are buying it, hundreds of thousands at least. And now the legislature and the standardizing bodies have to react in some sort of manner. We're also involved in this. We're just finished a draft for a project to create a product standard for this technology, and also we're trying to include any battery system to create. We had a petition this year which demands that small scale battery systems, again with up to 800 watts it is with us, right? Not 1200. With 800 watts, as long as the battery has the same wattage, why treat it differently? It really doesn't matter where the energy comes from, right? So we want to have the same simplification by law added for small-scale batteries, plug-in batteries as well. So yeah, this is something we're still working on, though. So it's that gray area, and yeah, it's in progress.
That's great. And we have a question about cost. How much do these cost in Germany versus the US? And a couple of people asked, can I get one right now from Bright Saver? I swear we didn't plant that question, but would anyone like to take that series?
I can start with Germany if you wish. We've seen significant price drops in the last, let's say, 2 years. I remember back in 2022, it was about 4 times, 5 times the cost you have today. So you can buy a set with 2 panels with 1,000 watts with an inverter for about 400 euros. It's really, really cheap. So I can't speak for the US, but in Germany, this is basically dollar store goods now, more or less.
And I don't even know how to answer that for the US. I mean, I don't know if Crostrom, I know, has worked some with Bright Saver. I don't know if they have prices. EcoFlow is a company that has said that they will come sell in Utah and has started taking pre-orders. I think they're still some weeks away from when they said they would start to do delivery. And like I said, for me, just because it was my bill, I'm not going to buy one until the standard is out. But then I will when we get there, and the market really isn't up and running yet. I don't know where it will settle.
Yes, and I can also just show the one that I saw that is promoted by IKEA in Germany this morning. So starting at 1,400 euros, that's about $1,600, but that is 4 solar panels and a battery. So that is a complete set. It's basically a true home power plant that gives you some resilience during power outage. Just to the point that Christian made earlier, and Raymond can save up the energy that you produce during the day and use it in the evening and in the morning when you actually need it. You can also help the grid out when there is a lot of demand on the grid during very hot days. Everyone turns on their air conditioners. You have these virtual power plant events where the grid operator is allowed to draw some energy back out of your battery, and they will compensate you very well for it. So the battery is really a game changer, and that's roughly what we are charging. So we are collaborating with Craftstorm to sell a small amount of pilot devices here in California. And the 1,400 euros, $1,600, that is roughly what we have to charge for a system half the size without a battery here in California. So that's how much it's several times more affordable in Germany, simply due to the volume of systems being sold due to the scale that this has achieved and due to the ease of regulation. So all these things are making it much more expensive. In California, with our very high energy prices, that is still an attractive deal for consumers, but we want to bring prices down toward German level in order to make it affordable, accessible, and attractive in many other states, and to as broad a constituency as possible.
That's right. Well, I'm mindful of time and I want to make sure we don't go over, but thank you to our guests and my 2 co-founders. I mean, this was a fascinating conversation, and the audience questions are just superb. So we can't wait to dig in more detail on those. And there just a lot of these questions about what's next. So we're going to be pursuing legislation in a number of states, and we're going to dive into that conversation. What is the path ahead for us in the United States on July 29th, 5 weeks from today, same time, same place. You'll get an invitation to that as well. I'll be leading that conversation, and my co-founders will be there as well. We'll have some guests who have been working in solar policy for quite a while, and we're excited to dive into that. And most of all, thank you all for being here. This was a fascinating discussion, and I feel even more pumped and hopeful for what we're able to do here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you, Cora. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Kevin, for getting us started.
And we will post the recording. A couple people have asked. You'll have a chance to look at the recording. We'll probably post it on our website, and we'll send out an email about that as well.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.